This series is based on a true story. The events begin in Harlem on April 19, 1989. A boy named Antron McCrae loves to play cards with his father Robert. Teenager Kevin Richardson is passionate about music. Today is the beginning of summer vacation. Kevin's older sister Angie advised him not to waste this time. Korey Wise often skips school to be with his girlfriend Lisa. Raymond Santana is also an ordinary guy who enjoys hanging out with his friends. In the evenings many teenagers go out to avoid boredom at home. When Korey's friends called him, he left Lisa at the diner and went with them, which really hurt her. The guys were going to play basketball. Kevin's mother is ill. As she was sleeping, the son carefully covered her with a blanket and was about to join his friends. Meanwhile on the street, as always after dark, the fun was in full swing. The guys were making a lot of noise and bothering passers-by. Soon a fight broke out. Such things often happen in this neighborhood. Hearing the sirens of police cars, the teenagers scattered. Some were caught by the police, while others managed to escape. That same night, a wounded white woman who had clearly been attacked, was found in a nearby forest. Fortunately the woman survived. The police and a forensic team were working at the crime scene. The investigation was led by Linda Fairstein. Someone had attacked that woman and after committing unacceptable acts, left her in the forest. Ms. Richardson came to the police station for her 14-year-old son Kevin, who is in the 8th grade. Mr. Santana along with his mother also came. However, the police officers refused to release Ray right away. All the detained boys were questioned. One of them claimed that he had done nothing wrong in the park. Linda Fairstein hoped to get a lead on the woman's case. Perhaps one of the boys had seen something. Antron McCrae's parents knew that their son had been in the park that night and that the police had detained many of his friends for hooliganism. Antron had managed to escape. He told his father in detail about the commotion in the park. The father was very disappointed, as he had not raised his son to behave that way. Soon the police came to their house. Mr. McCrae realized at once that this visit did not bode well. The officer ordered Antron to bring the clothes he had worn the previous night. The chief of the detective department gave a statement to the press. The injured woman is currently in the hospital in critical condition. Linda Fairstein collated all the available information and created a timeline of events. This led her to conclude that the detained boys were not witnesses to the crime, but suspects. At Linda's request, Nancy Ryan from the prosecutor's office, who is part of the Major Crimes Unit, arrived. District Attorney Robert Morgenthau listened to Linda's report, in which she claimed that the boys not only attacked cyclists and joggers but were directly involved in the park incident. Robert assigned Nancy and Linda to look into it. She presented her version of events to the colleagues. This crime was truly heinous. Linda called those guys animals and was convinced that they should face the harshest punishment. However, Nancy saw no connection between the boys and the park incident. Wishing Linda luck, she left. Linda, however, intended to see the case through, stating that any black man seen in the park last night could be a potential suspect. The entire department was involved in the investigation. The police stopped and questioned every black man on the street. Upon seeing the officers, Korey and his friend Yusuf Salam wanted to leave immediately, but a detective noticed them and ordered to provide identification. Yusuf appeared suspicious to the officers, so he was detained. Korey went to the station with his friend to support him. The boys did not return home, so their parents were very worried. Linda ordered the detectives to interrogate the detainees and treat them not as teenagers but as dangerous criminals. Kevin was the first to be interrogated. Detective Hartigan and his colleagues asked him to tell them who he was with in the park the previous night. Kevin did not know all the names. Feeling pressure from the detectives, the boy became increasingly nervous. He was also worried about his sick mother. Antron was interrogated in the presence of his parents. The boy had to confirm that last night he was in the company of the guys who were attacking passers-by. Yusuf insisted that he did not attack anyone. If Yusuf had known in advance how it would all end, he would not have gone anywhere yesterday. Raymond, who looked older than a 7th grader, did not understand what park incident they were talking about. When Kevin and the other boys were accused of attacking the woman, they were shocked, as were their parents. To mislead the teenagers, the detectives told each of them that the others had already confessed to the group crime. The detectives pressured the detainees, not giving them a chance to justify themselves. Then the detectives changed tactics, persuading the boys to confess voluntarily and turn in the accomplices to reduce their punishment. Detective Hartigan forced Raymond to say that Kevin did it. Kevin in turn denied everything, shouting that he was innocent. Using this strategy, the detectives intimidated the boys, making each of them blame the others to save themselves. Hearing these heinous accusations against their children, the parents were horrified. Antron's mother had a hysterical fit and was taken out of the interrogation room. Trying to remain calm, Mr. McCrae asked Detective Hildebrandt for a private conversation and explained that his son was a quiet boy who never hurt anyone. In the past, Bobby McCrae had been in prison, but now he worked a good job and was a model citizen. The detective strongly advised Bobby to talk to his son frankly. When they were left alone, the father asked Antron to say what the police wanted to hear. Even if it was a lie, it might be the only way to get out of here. Antron kept repeating that he was innocent. No longer able to maintain his composure, Bobby said that the police always get what they want by any means necessary. That's why Antron would have to cooperate, whether he wanted to or not. The detectives interrupted the father and son's conversation. The victim was a white woman, Patricia Maley, who was jogging that fateful evening. Her boyfriend said she was an experienced runner and could run a mile in 8 minutes. On a deserted road near the park, someone grabbed her. There was a discrepancy of 45 minutes. Michael Sheehan suggested adjusting the time of the crime, even so the timeline didn't match. To save their version, the detectives decided to change the sequence of events in the case files. Mr. Santana, who didn't understand what was happening, was brought into the interrogation room. Hearing the accusations against his son, the man couldn't believe it. Raymond asked his father to calm down, saying he had made a deal with the investigators. Ray claimed that Kevin attacked Tricia Maley first. Meanwhile, another detective was persuading Kevin to testify against Raymond and Antron. The boy had to confirm everything the detective said. Of course, neither Raymond nor Antron was actually in the park that night, but Kevin, being very scared, claimed otherwise. Kevin also said that he tried to stop it and help the woman. Angie came to the police station for her younger brother. After reading his statement, she couldn't believe Kevin was involved in anything like that. Kevin, in tears, kept repeating that he didn't do anything wrong. Angie didn't understand why he then testified against boys he didn't even know. Kevin begged his sister to just sign the document, that way he'd be allowed to go home. Angie doubted whether she should sign it, but the detectives insisted. Having obtained all the necessary testimonies, the police were confident the case would soon be brought to court. Yusuf's mother only now learned that her son had been detained. The woman immediately went to the police station. Linda stated that Yusuf had refused a lawyer. Sharon threatened to contact the New York Times and tell them that the police had interrogated a minor without parental consent. In the end, she was allowed to see her son. She hugged him, stating that they would not refuse a lawyer. The detectives did not stop Ms. Salam when she led her son out of the interrogation room. Mr. Santana had to sign all the papers the detectives gave him. Raymond hadn't eaten for 18 hours, and his father asked the detective for permission to buy food for the son. The detective gave him 5 minutes before Raymond would be taken to a cell. Mr. Santana was very broken, as was his mother, on whose lap Raymond dozed. The father knew that his son hadn't done any of what he was accused of. Linda met with Assistant District Attorney Elizabeth Lederer, who had already studied the case files. All 5 boys were telling 5 different versions, but Linda still didn't intend to back down. Antron was interrogated again. He denied being involved, saying he only watched. Elizabeth insisted there was no physical evidence pointing to the boys' guilt. Moreover, their testimonies didn't match. The detectives decided that Korey Wise would be the one to tie everything together. Of course, this case caused a stir in the press. Korey's mother, Dolores, went to every station trying to find the son, as the police wouldn't tell her anything. The press hounded her. This morning she finally found out that her son was at the 24th precinct. Korey met with Elizabeth Lederer to make a statement. She didn't know that before this, the detectives had beaten the guy, threatening him that if Tricia Maley passed away in the hospital, he would never get out of prison. During the conversation with Elizabeth, Korey testified on camera against Raymond, Yusuf, Kevin, Antron and himself. Korey swore that this was his first such experience and that it would be his last. There wasn't enough space in the juvenile jail, so Korey was placed in a regular cell. The other boys were not faring any better. However, they finally had the opportunity to meet in person. They all had been forced to testify against each other, and each of them was very regretful. The police gave them no choice but to lie. Apparently for the authorities, the most important thing was to find the culprits as soon as possible. The boys were transferred. They became the focus of intense media interest. Just a few days ago they were ordinary teenagers, and now they faced real prison terms for a serious group crime they did not commit. 6 months passed since the arrest. Due to numerous injuries, Tricia Maley didn't remember the moment of the attack or the faces of the assailants. Doctors couldn't guarantee that she would ever fully recover. The 5 boys were still considered the main suspects in the case. Authorities were convinced that the cause was poverty and teenage aggression. However, there was also an opinion in society that all these arrests were purely racially motivated. To date, 2 of the boys, Antron McCrae and Yusuf Salam, have been released on bail pending trial. Korey is the only 16-year-old alleged perpetrator, the others are younger. This incident is being talked about in all the news. The boys are coping as best they can. Today they are facing a preliminary hearing. Kevin, the youngest of the boys, is very nervous. His mother has almost collected the necessary bail amount through church donations. Now Korey regrets agreeing to go to the police station with Yusuf on that fateful day. He only wanted to support his friend, not realizing what it could lead to for him. But the past cannot be changed. The Reverend doesn't believe in the boys' guilt and intends to do everything to help them. He is the one who raised the necessary bail amount for Yusuf. Sharon Salam can't take a single step freely without immediately being surrounded by the press. When she learned that a well-known politician was calling for Yusuf to be sentenced to the maximum penalty, she hugged her son and broke down in tears. Sharon was tired and sipping wine, shared her worries with a close friend. It was clear that Yusuf and the other boys were deemed guilty because of their skin color. Sharon would never allow anyone to harm her son. The woman found a lawyer, Mr. Burns, who had never dealt with criminal law before, only handling divorces and other family matters. Mickey Joseph from the Legal Aid Society would represent Antron McCray in court. Korey Wise's lawyer was Colin Moore, an activist. He promised Dolores Wise to bring her son home. Peter Rivera, an assistant district attorney in the Bronx and a former police officer, would represent Raymond Santana in court. Kevin Richardson would be represented by Howard Diller. Elizabeth Lederer understood that for each of these people, this was a big opportunity to build their careers and make a name for themselves. They were clearly determined to win the case, so don't underestimate them. The lawyers discussed all the details of the case among themselves. There was no physical evidence against the boys, but it won't be easy to convince the jury that the police pressured the teenagers into making false confessions. Elizabeth intended to hold 2 or 3 separate hearings. They needed to select the right combination of defendants, requiring the least amount of editing of the confession tapes. The situation was not very good, and the lawyers spoke openly about this to their clients. The prosecutor offered a deal. If the defendants admitted their guilt, they would receive a lighter sentence. However, the boys were not going to confess to something they didn't do. Neither they nor their parents fully understood yet that their guilt or innocence did not matter. Linda told Elizabeth and Robert Morgenthau about the evidence from the crime scene with DNA samples. The defense knew nothing about this. Somehow the evidence hadn't reached the police. All the TV channels are covering this incident. Bobby still can't believe this is actually happening. The public is convinced of his son's guilt and that of the other boys. Calling his wife, Bobby said he wouldn't be coming home today because his boss asked him to work a double shift. In reality, this was a lie. The hearing is tomorrow, and Bobby is very worried. Antron's father is running late. The mother doesn't know if he will show up at all. There were demonstrations in the streets. Activists were demanding a fair trial for black people. This gave someone like Antron hope. The activists also accused the authorities of racism and defended the boys' innocence. Like Linda, Elizabeth is determined to put the defendants behind bars, even if it means resorting to unfair tactics. The time for the hearing has come. Judge Galligan gave the opening statement to Elizabeth Lederer, who declared that Kevin Richardson, Korey Wise, and Raymond Santana, who are on trial today, are guilty of this heinous crime against a white woman, and their confessions are direct evidence of this. The lawyers insisted that the defendants' confessions were not made voluntarily. There are no witnesses who could identify any of the accused. Moreover, the detectives broke the law by interrogating the teenagers without their parents present and without allowing them to eat for more than a day. Addressing the jury, Mr. Burns emphasized that this case clearly has racial undertones. The police didn't even consider other suspects. The prosecutor called the first witness, Dr. Kurds, who was on duty in the emergency room the night of the incident. According to him, Patricia Maley was admitted in critical condition. The second witness, Ms. Dean, described how a group of aggressive teenagers harassed passers-by that night. The boys were laughing loudly and even used physical force. Another witness confirmed this, but according to John Laughlin, none of the defendants attacked passers-by. It was some other guys. Linda and Elizabeth were disappointed because the DNA from the crime scene didn't match the DNA of any of the boys. Their prosecution strategy was falling apart. With tears in her eyes, Elizabeth told Linda that the boys were innocent, but Linda didn't care. The whole country is watching them now, so they must at all costs somehow link the defendants to this crime and convince the jury of it. Linda claims that it's for Patricia Maley's sake, but Elizabeth doesn't believe that this will achieve justice for the victim. Patricia Maley was called as the next witness. Due to her injuries, she can barely walk. It's likely that her health will never fully recover. Yusuf prayed for Patricia's memory to return. Elizabeth Lederer asked her to recount everything she remembered about April 19, 1989. Patricia said that on that day, there was a meeting with the entire corporate finance department at her firm. She also recalled calling her friend at 5 o'clock to cancel their dinner plans. From that point on, she remembers nothing, including her evening jog. Patricia cannot say who attacked her or where exactly it happened. Elizabeth showed the victim evidence from the crime scene. Tricia identified her clothing and shoes, which had been white before the incident in the park. When asked about the aftermath of the attack, Tricia replied that she has problems walking, seeing and smelling. Her life was in the balance, and if she hadn't been found in time that night, she wouldn't be alive. The boys' parents were worried because Patricia didn't declare their innocence. The McCrays left the courthouse in silence. Antron asked his father why he was hardly ever home. Bobby evasively replied that he had to deal with some matters. Antron got into a taxi with his mother. Bobby didn't join them, only giving them money for the ride. The hearing continued. The lawyers countered the detectives' claims that the boys had confessed voluntarily. Before admitting guilt, the boys repeatedly said they were not involved in the crime. After the hearing, Antron sat down next to Raymond to offer support. Unlike Antron, Ray would not be going home but to a cell. Ray, like his father, had almost accepted the fact that it was over for him. Antron said that they must believe in a better outcome. That's all they have left. At the next hearing, a forensic expert testified that the DNA from the crime scene did not match the DNA of any of the defendants. This meant that someone else committed the crime. The boys' mothers cried and hugged each other, confident that their children would soon be released. Elizabeth Lederer feels no remorse and is ready to continue her dishonest game. Everything happening is politics, and there is nothing honest about politics. The lawyers informed their clients that the prosecution is offering them a plea deal again. If each of them pleads guilty, they will serve their sentences, but it will be a fraction of what they might receive if the court's verdict is unfavorable. The prosecution's main trump card is the confession tapes. Yusuf refuses to admit to something he didn't do. The others supported him. During the next hearing, Raymond's lawyer asked one of the detectives, who was called as a witness, if the defendant could accurately point out the crime scene. The detective tried to avoid answering but eventually had to admit that Raymond was unable to identify the crime scene. Bobby fell into a depression and is constantly away from home, while his family tries to cope in their own way. It was a difficult decision for Bobby to come back. The McCrays went to the next hearing. Hundreds of people took to the streets with signs in support of the defendants. These people believe that the boys were framed. Antron doesn't hide his resentment towards the father, who is constantly absent while his son's life is on the line. Bobby is very ashamed of being a bad father and just running away from the problem. It was Bobby's turn to testify. He recounted how the police threatened him and his son. Bobby now regrets that during the interrogation he told the son to say whatever the police wanted to hear. It was a big mistake, but Bobby just wanted the officers to let his son go home. Elizabeth Lederer continues to insist that the confession tapes are irrefutable evidence. On the tape, Antron details how he and the other boys attacked Patricia Maley. Antron realized that it was all over for him. Mickey Joseph tried to encourage the boy, saying that they must keep fighting. The jury was shown videos where the boys described the incident in detail. It didn't look like they were forced to do it. Watching and listening to this, the boys cried. With tears in his eyes, Korey said that Detective Hildebrandt hit him several times, forcing him to lie. The detectives convinced the boys that they would be witnesses in the case and could go home if they played along. Elizabeth was not at all convinced by Korey's words. She argued that he had signed the confession statement. No longer able to contain his emotions, Korey repeated that he was a poor reader. Elizabeth continued to press, asking the boy if it was true that he regularly skipped school. Korey didn't understand what this had to do with the case. In the end, he refused to answer any more questions. Answering questions was the reason he was here. Raymond looked like he had already come to terms with the injustice of what was happening. When Antron cried, Ray and Yusuf hugged him. During the hearing, the prosecution and defense continued their confrontation. The lawyers insisted that there was no evidence or witnesses pointing to the defendants, but Elizabeth dismissed all arguments, asserting that all 5 boys were guilty. The day came when the judge was ready to announce the verdict. Each of the boys was found guilty. Upon hearing the verdict, the parents cried, as did the boys themselves. They were powerless to do anything. In honor of Raymond's grandmother's birthday, the family and friends threw a party, but the woman's mood was anything but festive. She couldn't hold back tears when talking about her grandson, who wasn't with them today. She was convinced that Raymond Jr. had been framed. Later, Raymond Sr.'s brother told him that the whole situation had deeply affected their mother. She was not the same as before. Raymond understood that his son's arrest had impacted the entire family, but he was powerless to do anything about it. Raymond often argued with his new wife. They had a small child, and money was desperately scarce. Every day Raymond Sr. waited for a call from his son from the juvenile jail. Despite the unjust sentence, the boy tried to stay strong. His father regularly sent him money so he could buy extra food. Raymond Sr. and his mother constantly visited Raymond Jr., just as Mrs. McCray visited her son Antron. The boy confessed that he was tormented by nightmares and insomnia. The woman desperately wanted to take her son away from here, but it was impossible. A mother's love kept Antron from losing hope completely. Ray also held on, thanks to his family's support. Many years passed before grown-up Antron was released from prison. All this time his mother waited for him, and finally they were reunited. Antron had almost forgotten what it was like to be free. Not much had changed in the house. His father Bobby was very old. Seeing the son, he couldn't believe his eyes. Antron didn't want to hug his father, as he was still angry with him. Throughout all those years, Bobby had never visited his son in prison. For a long time the McCrae spouses were separated. One day Bobby called the ex-wife, and from his voice she immediately understood that he was suffering. Eventually they started living together again. Now Bobby's health is rapidly deteriorating. He has kidney, heart and respiratory problems. Mrs. McCrae is having a hard time. The son promised to take care of her from now on, but he doesn't care about his father. Many years ago, Antron made a mistake when he listened to his father at the police station and did everything the detectives told him to do. Mrs. McCrae still hopes that her husband and son will forgive each other, but Antron has made it clear that this will never happen. Events take us back in time again. Every week Raymond called his father. Year after year went by like this. Ray has grown up and continues to stay in touch with his father. This helped him not give up. When Raymond finished his sentence and got out of prison, he walked down the street, remembering what it meant to be free. The father and son hugged. At that moment both were crying. Their love had withstood this test. Raymond Sr. introduced his son to his wife Elena, who wasn't very pleased to see her stepson. The house was full of Elena's relatives, including small children. Raymond Jr.'s room was cluttered with various things because his brother had been living there for some time. The father introduced the older son to the younger one. The house was noisy, and the atmosphere was quite tense. Nevertheless, Raymond Sr. was very happy about his son's return and gave him some essentials. Raymond Jr. tidied up his room. Looking at old family photographs, he reminisced about the past. Now he has to start his life anew, just like Antron. Bobby prepared lunch for his son, hoping they could talk. However, Antron ignored the father. Sharon Salam was handing out flyers to passers-by, inviting them to a rally. She met the mothers of Kevin and Korey. Dolores Wise asked how the boys were doing. Sharon replied that Yusuf had devoted himself to religion and was studying the Quran. Dolores was sad that her son, unlike the other boys, was in an adult prison where there were no educational programs. The women prayed for each other's sons. Dolores wanted Korey and Yusuf to correspond, even though the law prohibits inmates from exchanging letters between prisons. Dolores believed they could help the boys, but Sharon thought it was a bad idea. Next year Yusuf is up for parole, so he shouldn't break the rules. Sharon visited her son in prison. Yusuf was no longer the same person he used to be. Religion had helped him find meaning in life. Sharon doesn't want to admit to the son that she lost her good job. The woman managed to get a job at a dry cleaner, knowing that when it comes out that her son is serving a prison sentence, she will lose this job too. Yusuf admitted that he often thinks about Korey. Yusuf feels guilty because on that fateful day, his friend went to the police station with him just for company. Sharon promised her son that everything would soon be alright. Yusuf knows that most people hate him and consider him a monster, but the mother's love keeps him from losing hope. Soon Yusuf returned home, and a party was thrown to celebrate. Yusuf was glad to be surrounded by close people who believed in him despite everything. The mother and sisters always visited Kevin all these years. Angie tries to cheer her brother up as much as she can and advised him to find a hobby. By the way, Angie's life has improved. She met a guy she fell in love with at first sight. However, when he invited her on a date, Angie refused because she believed she didn't deserve happiness while her brother was still here. Kevin wants his sister to be happy. Angie in turn feels guilty for not being able to protect her brother. However, after the mother said that guilt wouldn't affect the past or the future, Angie went on a date with Chris. Kevin was glad to hear that his sister was doing well. Before saying goodbye, they hugged. In the present, Angie picked up her grown-up brother, who had just been released from prison. Kevin was surprised at how much everything had changed around. All these years the family supported Kevin. It was only thanks to their love that he was able to stay the same. Korey is the only one still serving his sentence. Those of the guys who have already been released must report to the police station every 90 days according to the conditions of their parole. Raymond plans to find a job as soon as possible. The lawyer explained to him how not to violate the conditions of parole. For example, Raymond is prohibited from working at the same place with other criminals. Ray has been through many unsuccessful interviews. With a prison record it's not easy to find a job, and Ray was almost in despair. The Santans' house is always noisy due to the numerous children of relatives. This exhausts Raymond Jr. Moreover, he constantly conflicts with Elena's relatives and with Elena herself. Raymond Sr. doesn't dare to say a word against his wife. The conflict escalated when Elena insulted Raymond Jr., hinting at Patricia Maley. Raymond Sr. tried to smooth things over by promising his son that everything would get better. Antron managed to get a job at a local diner. He met a nice girl, a coworker. They started a conversation. Some guy thought Antron's face looked familiar. Antron lied that he wasn't local. Yusuf went to a salon to get his hair done. Not everyone considers him guilty. There are those who are sure that the boys were framed. Yusuf plans to return to his studies. He would like to work as a school teacher, but with his criminal record it's impossible. Raymond is trying to return to a normal life. Some of his old acquaintances don't even say hello to him, while others are happy to see him. Ray is glad that there are still those who support him. Raymond admitted to his father's old friend that he met a girl in prison through correspondence, who sympathized with him. However, Ray decided to stop communicating with her, believing she deserved better. But now Raymond has decided to call Tanya. They met. Tanya told Ray that she was hurt when he stopped communicating with her. Ray is really sorry. Tanya took his hand. When Elena found out that Ray had brought a girl home, she became furious and started yelling. Tanya hurried to leave, thinking Elena was Ray's wife. He went after her, trying to explain himself. However, Tanya now doesn't know if she wants this relationship. She left. After their shift, Antron and his colleague, with whom he is now dating, were walking down the street. Adele doesn't like that they don't go anywhere because Antron is saving all his earnings for education. In the end, the couple quarreled, and Adele, insulting Antron, broke up with him. Bobby's health continues to deteriorate. When he almost fell while trying to get out of bed, his son managed to catch him just in time. Antron often remembers how many years ago they played cards in the kitchen. Seeing his father dying, Antron cried. Deep down he had already forgiven him. Soon the funeral took place. Raymond and Tanya reconciled. Their relationship is developing rapidly. By the way, Ray got a job. Life is gradually getting better. Soon Tanya shared excellent news with the beloved. Her sister is moving out soon, so they will be able to rent the house she was renting. Tanya is studying to become a teacher's assistant and is receiving a scholarship. But even that, along with Raymond's salary, may not be enough to cover the rent. Soon Ray lost his job. This forced him to join a local gang that was dealing in substances. Soon Yusuf and Kevin accidentally crossed paths at a group session that everyone on parole must attend. They were very happy to see each other. Yusuf shared that he found a job in a telemarketing company. Kevin still can't get used to the fact that many people look at him with disdain. Now he lives with his mother and sisters. Kevin was surprised to learn that Yusuf, who had been out of prison for only 7 months, was already married. His wife's name is LaQuisha, and she works as a manager at the same firm as Yusuf. The guys still hope to prove their innocence, even though most people are convinced otherwise. In general, all the guys want to make up for lost time and live full lives. Ray has some money now, so he occasionally gives gifts to his younger brother. Tomorrow Ray plans to move out of the house. When the young man gave his father money, he refused to take it. Raymond Sr. knows how this money was earned and warns his son. This could end very badly for him. Ray said that he is just trying to be independent. That unjust trial ruined his life. Seeing her stepson taking his things from the house, Elena gloated. Before that night in the park, which divided the boys' lives into before and after, they were just ordinary teenagers. They lost their best years, being unjustly accused of something they didn't do. Soon Ray was arrested. When he found out, Raymond Sr. cried. His son was back in prison. Korey Wise had it the hardest because he was tried as an adult. Hearing the court's verdict, Korey shouted to Elizabeth Lederer that she had lied about him. Korey was sent to a prison 7 miles from Harlem. He ended up among the most dangerous criminals in New York State. Korey has no idea about the unspoken rules in prison. The guard's name is Simon, and he knows his job well. Simon took Korey to his cell. The guard was only nice to inmates who could do him some good. Korey doesn't understand what Simon wants from him. The boy knows one thing: he shouldn't be here. The cells are infested with rats. Threats and foul language can be heard everywhere. Those who have been here long enough have already gone wild. Korey huddled in a corner crying. In the prison canteen he felt even more uncomfortable. Now this is his new reality. Fights between inmates are common here. Korey preferred to always stay on the sidelines. Soon he met a guy who, like everyone here, had heard about Korey's case and the 4 other boys. This guy doesn't believe in their guilt. Korey said he hates this place. The guy advised him to file a petition for transfer to another prison. However, it might take a year or 2. Korey was going to the library, where he could get help with that, but 2 big guys blocked his way. Korey begged them not to touch him, which only angered the guys more. Simon saw this but did not try to intervene. Korey ended up in the prison medical unit with multiple bruises. The nurse seemed very kind. Korey cried, intending to talk to the warden or the guards. The nurse advised him not to do this, otherwise the medicine might not help next time. Korey doesn't know what to do now and needs help. He is unable to stand up for himself. All the nurse could do for him was to ease his pain a little. Korey had to return to his cell. Simon repeated to the boy that he only protects those who can be of some use to him. Dolores was unable to visit her son right away because this prison is quite far from Harlem. Korey also has a brother, but he hasn't been in touch with their mother for a long time. Korey tried not to show how bad it was for him here so as not to upset his mother. The boy wanted to write a letter to Yusuf, but they are forbidden to correspond. Now he is completely alone. If Korey gets approval for a transfer to another prison, the mother could visit him more often. Korey asked her to put some money on his prison account. Dolores in tears told her son that she had nothing to give him. But she promised to come up with something. Later, Simon approached Korey and advised him not to go to the medical unit anymore because only snitches go there. Korey realized that to survive, he must either adapt to the new conditions or achieve a transfer to another prison. And Korey did get a transfer to another prison. However, it is 352 miles from Harlem, much farther from Korey's family. It was 1991. Other inmates, who had heard about Korey's case, gave him a less than warm welcome. Guard Roberts stopped the fight, ordering the inmates to return to work. However, as soon as Roberts left, they attacked Korey again. When Roberts found out, he intended to take Korey to the infirmary, but Korey refused, asking for permission to be transferred to a solitary cell. His request was granted. Korey often remembers and curses the day he agreed to go to the police station with Yusuf so as not to leave him alone. Korey had always been a good friend, and it played against him. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the solitary cell, Korey slowly started to lose his mind. He imagined talking to his brother Norman, who considered himself a girl. When they were teenagers, Korey shared his grand plans for the future with Norman. Korey dreamed of becoming a police officer and dedicating his life to helping people. However, Korey's dreams were not destined to come true. Roberts came to his cell and told him that the Reverend wanted to see him. The priest sadly informed Korey that his brother Norman had perished last week. Korey recalls how the mother used to throw Norman out of the house for wanting to become a woman. Norman would have left anyway because it was unbearable for him to stay at home any longer. The mother constantly insulted the son, calling him a clown and a disgrace to the family. Norman asked to be called Marcy, but Dolores was not going to do it. Korey didn't want his brother to leave, but their mother made it clear that she would no longer tolerate Norman in the house. Because of him, she had lost almost all her friends. Saying goodbye to Korey, Norman left. Now remembering his brother, Korey cries and asks for permission to call the mother, the only close person he has left. When Korey was on the edge, Roberts hugged him, calming down. He really seemed to care. Korey had so much he wanted to say to his brother but never got the chance. Now he was just sobbing. Korey was taken back to his solitary cell. The ventilation system was broken, making it extremely hot. This drove Korey even more insane. Roberts felt sympathy for Korey and brought him books. Now Korey at least had something to occupy himself with. He still hopes to receive a letter from one of his loved ones. Roberts became Korey's only friend here. But it still upsets Korey that no one calls or writes to him from home. One day Korey received a special gift from Roberts. The guard also got Korey a job as a prison janitor, promising that none of the inmates would harm him anymore. Roberts believes Korey deserves to be treated humanely. Korey diligently performed his duties to not disappoint his new friend. When the ventilation system was fixed, Korey was as happy as a child. Soon Korey felt more confident and stopped being afraid. Now he could stand up for himself and once even fought with another inmate over the TV volume. Roberts did not expect this from him at all. Soon there was a court hearing regarding Korey Wise's request for parole. A bruise from the fight the day before was clearly visible on his face. When the commission members asked Korey if he was ready to fully admit guilt and take responsibility for the crime, Korey couldn't bring himself to say yes. Finally, for the first time in a long while, Dolores visited her son in prison. She now lives very far from here. Unable to hold back, Korey burst into tears, begging his mother to visit more often. The separation was very hard on them. Dolores urged her son to pray and not lose faith. However, Korey is losing hope. One day he asked Roberts if he could transfer to another prison. It's his only way to see his mother more frequently. Roberts replied that it was risky because there was a chance he could be transferred even farther away. But Korey was willing to take the risk, believing that his streak of bad luck had ended. Unfortunately, Korey was terribly mistaken. In 1993, he ended up in a prison that was 366 miles from Harlem, even farther away. There was no longer a Roberts here to stand up for Korey. When Korey was attacked, the local guard not only didn't stop the fight but even aided the other inmates. Korey was taken to the prison's intensive care unit in serious condition. If in a month he can walk and chew without pain, it will be a miracle. However, contrary to expectations, Korey recovered much faster than the doctors predicted. The guard didn't hide from Korey that it was he who incited the inmates to give him a warm welcome. Korey had a choice: stay in solitary confinement or return to the general prison block. Of course Korey stayed. He often thinks about his ex-girlfriend Lisa. If he had stayed with her at the diner that fateful evening, nothing bad would have happened. Korey's life would have turned out completely differently. Korey would give anything to change his decision from many years ago. He would have liked to see the world with Lisa and live each day as if it were the last. Korey didn't appreciate freedom before, taking it for granted. Soon the next parole hearing took place. However, Korey was still not ready to admit guilt for the crime. In his cell, Korey cried out in despair that he hated everyone and everything. Korey is here completely unjustly, but he can't do anything about it. Korey knows that his mother would like to help him. He doesn't hold a grudge against her that she rarely visits him. More than anything, Korey now wants to hug his mother. In 2001, Korey ended up in another prison, 266 miles from Harlem. He did not expect to see his old friend Roberts here. It seemed that Korey had come to terms with his new reality and was trying to stay in shape. When it was time for the next hearing, Korey refused to attend. He was not going to lie. Korey earned the respect of other inmates by steadfastly maintaining his innocence. Matias Reyes, with whom Korey had previously fought in another prison, told him not to lose faith. However, to Korey, these were just empty words. What Korey didn't know was that Matias had requested a meeting with authorities in the prison where he was serving a life sentence. District Attorney Robert Morgenthau reviewed this request. Both he and his assistant, Nancy Ryan, were shocked when Matias confessed to the attack on Patricia Maley in 1989. Nancy Ryan personally met with Matias, who recounted all the details of the incident in the park. Matias fully admitted his guilt and confirmed that he acted alone. When Tricia was jogging along a deserted road, Matias followed her, then knocked her out from behind and dragged into the park. After committing his heinous act, Matias, believing that Tricia would not survive, left her in the woods. It turned out that the real perpetrator had been walking through the park with Tricia's player in his ears, and not a single policeman had caught him. Ms. Ryan met with one of the detectives who had investigated Tricia's case. After thoroughly reviewing all the case materials and finding numerous discrepancies, Nancy realized that the detectives had coerced the teenagers into confessing under pressure. Of course, now each of the detectives would deny that they interrogated the teenagers for 42 hours straight, prohibiting them from eating and sleeping. Matias once again confirmed that he had committed the crime without any accomplices and voluntarily agreed to provide a DNA sample. Having turned to religion, he didn't want anyone else to pay for his sins. Nancy met with Linda Fairstein, who still refused to admit she was wrong. Nancy said that all the evidence pointed to Matias. He had given them a minute-by-minute account of the events of that night. And most importantly, his DNA matched that found at the crime scene. Linda didn't want to hear any of it and left. Korey was surprised when the guard came for him. At first the guy thought that someone of his loved ones had passed away again. The warden handed Korey a phone. He heard his mother's voice, saying that he would be released soon. Korey couldn't believe it when he heard that the real perpetrator had confessed. Dolores was crying. At last her prayers had been answered. The other guys, who had already returned to normal life except for Ray, no longer expected justice for themselves. But it happened. It was all over the news. If the detectives had done their job properly, 5 lives wouldn't have been ruined. And justice was restored not because of the police but because the real culprit spoke up. Ray was also released. His father came to pick him up. All charges against the boys were dropped. This incredible case received wide media coverage. The guys, whose youth had been irrevocably lost in prison, regained their good names. Walking the streets of the city as a free man, Korey thought of Lisa. He went into the diner where they used to love ordering fast food. In 2014, all 5 received a compensation of $41 million, the largest payout in New York State history. Antron McCray happily married and became the father of 6 children. He and his family reside in Atlanta, Georgia. Raymond Santana Jr. became the proud father of a teenage daughter, Melia. He lives in Georgia, where he founded a clothing company. Yusuf Salam also resides in Georgia. He is married and has 10 children. Yusuf writes books and advocates for changes in the justice system. Kevin Richardson lives in New Jersey with his wife and 2 daughters. In 2017, he received a high school diploma, 28 years after his arrest. Korey Wise is the only one who still lives in New York City. In 2015, he established and funded a project that provides free assistance to the wrongfully convicted. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.